Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in the secular world. I'm just throwing in this intro because, again, with Franco, we just don't film intros for some reason. And I just wanted to let you guys know that my audio is a little wonky in the beginning, but then we figure it out and it gets better. So just bear with me there. That's just the joys of podcasting, I guess. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Don't forget to rate and share with anyone who might need it. All right, I hope you enjoy. If you guys remember, Franco and I like to talk about some hot button topics. We like to discuss things in a joyful way, but we're not afraid of controversy, which is why I like Franco, because he can talk about controversy in a way that makes it less controversial.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It's all about love, just communicating the good intentions.
Love,
of course. That's what we have. That's what we have. That really is what we have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, even though we never really know what to talk about when we start these podcasts, we end up talking about a whole lot of stuff.
That's true. That's true.
And, something I wanted to touch on, though, first, something I forgot to mention in our last podcast was I kept mentioning the whole LGBTQ Jubilee year thing, but I never actually ended up telling them what the Pope Respector said about it. And the fake news is that the headline is Pope Francis has proclaimed a special Jubilee year for LGBTQ community. Now, people like Taylor Marshall and everybody kind of shared this, but this actually isn't true. The truth is that the Vatican spokesperson stated that they allowed any group to register and go on the calendar and immediately clarified that this is not an endorsement or sponsorship. So this is just another example of how misinformation and stuff can be spread by some of the most biggest platforms. Yeah. And it's something we all need to be vigilant about and realize that we have a duty as Catholics to preach truth and to understand the truth and to realize that not everything on the internet is true. And it goes for these big name people as well. But anyways, we're going to talk about some controversy.
Yeah, no, I think that I would like to open this with saying how important it is to defend the papacy, honestly. I talked on the last podcast about how, when we speak about the Pope in public, a lot of the people that might call themselves conservative and Catholic, which is good. Every Catholic should be conservative, obviously. Like that's, the teachings of the Catholic Church are indeed conservative. In fact, honestly, I kind of don't even like the word conservative so much because it's like, they're not really they're not really stuck to a certain time. They're eternal truths. But anyways, it's obviously traditional, right? Tradition plus living teacher, which is of course going to give us even further understanding of, teachings throughout the future because it's a living teacher. But the thing with like a lot of these people that might call themselves conservative online and it's still Catholic is that I don't back what I was getting at in the last episode is that this sort of attitude really does not help. Just the faithful. I really don't think it does. Like I do think that if you want to get like good boy points from people that also don't like the Pope, that's great. Like I don't think that's great actually. Sorry, I retract that. But like if that's your way to like connect with people and like kind of build common ground with, other people that are not Catholic, I frankly think that you might be selling them on something that is not Catholicism because like you are supposed to respect your father. You're supposed to respect your father. The Pope is your spiritual father. And how we speak about him online and in public in general is so important. And not only, and like you might think like, and if you don't really care about the Pope, what he says and stuff like that, then you're like, that's not like really in alignment with what the church teaches. Like the Pope is the uniting visible anchor point of the church. Like that's literally like that the church is built on this rock. You can't just be like, oh, I don't care about him. I don't care what he says. I don't even pay attention to him. And I actually kind of had a bit of this medieval, mind, this like a bit of a medieval mindset before. Like it's like not obvious. The medieval mindset I think is still fine to an extent. Like because I think a lot of people that might develop the medieval mindset, are like doing that with intentions of being like, because I think the person that coined that term is another person that also loves the, is very charitable towards the Pope. But the point of that, mindset is to pretty much be like, look, I'm not gonna, be so worried about the news and get all up and like get all concerned and anxious about stuff that I can't even control. There's really no point to it. The Church of Christ is not going to fall, right? So I don't really have to worry about what the Pope has said this time or whatever, right? Um, but at the same time, right? Like we do, I do think that we do live in, obviously we do live in the information age. Information is largely enormously powerful, and it can really convert souls. And so
Mhm.
I do think that we should be engaged in the culture online and stuff like that, and like be able to combat a lot of this, like a lot of this deception that goes on with a lot of these people, that even people that might call themselves Catholic. I think that a lot of like even some news sites, honestly, you got to remember Catholic news sites are run by other people. They're run by people, which can be very fallible. I mean, obviously the Pope can be fallible, and it's not infallible in all situations. He's also not fallible he's also not infallible all the time. But again, like this, the reason why I'm kind of dancing around the topic, but like the reason why this is so important is not is I did touch on why it's the visible anchor point, but also because, as Pope Pius X said, the Pope is the guardian of dogma and morality. He's the
Mm.
guardian of it. He's not the creator of it, but he's the guardian of it. You could, in other words, you could literally say he is the guardian of tradition. You're not the guardian of tradition. Not some priest that you like what he says when he dunks on the Pope or Vatican II or the Novus Ordo. He's not the guardian of tradition. Neither is some schismatic bishop or whatever. We can help guard tradition, but the ultimate guardian of tradition is the Pope. It's the papacy. Without the papacy, you don't have the Catholic Church. You just have some decentralized system like the Orthodox, where you don't have a final human authority to settle disagreements on matters of faith and morals. That's why, and given, God bless the Orthodox. I love the Orthodox. I really pray for unity with them. But the reason why they have so much disunity in the Orthodox churches, yes, they're not one, is because they don't have a final visible unitive anchor point. They don't have a true hierarchy in that sense. They don't have a kingdom like hierarchy. This is what we see. This is what we see with Moses, with Abraham, with King David. There's always someone, an ultimate authority that God has given us, a human earthly authority that God has given us to guide the people that are chosen, to guide the Israel. Of course, Israel being the Church of Christ, right? That is literally how you can maintain such order and this hierarchy, and of course perfect love as well. So that's why when you see the Orthodox, Russia breaks off from the Eastern and Oriental are not even in communion with each other. Some Eastern might be saying like, well, the Orientals are not true Orthodox. Well, then who defines what's true Orthodoxy? Your church? Why that's not in communion with this other Orthodox church? It's like, how do you know which one do you submit to? That why is how do you know that the Orthodox are correct on divorce and not the Catholic Church? The Orthodox allow divorce, the Catholic Church doesn't allow divorce. There's a lot of other, and of course you can, people don't even talk about this too much, but like the canon of the Bible, which is like our literal and the inspired word of God. This book that the church has given a definitive amount of books that belong in the canon. The Orthodox churches don't have a definitive unified canon. They don't. And if you think I'm lying, if please enlighten me, because I would love to know if I really am saying something that is deceiving. Because from what I've seen, Orthodox might just give you several different varying answers, and they won't give you like a definitive answer on this, or they'll say, "Well, it doesn't matter. We don't need a definitive answer," which I think is probably the more accurate Orthodox position, that that they don't need a definitive canon of the Bible. So, and you see a lot of people like really moving towards towards this movement of the Orthodox churches, which I think is still good, because like the Orthodox churches still have apostolic succession, they have the sacraments and stuff like that, and they have so many beautiful churches. So I think this is all really good. But again, like, we can't solve liberalism to the best extent if we don't attack it at its root. And liberalism begins when you start protesting and liberalize yourself from the literal kingdom-like hierarchy, from the garden of tradition, from the garden of dogma and morality that God has given us. There's a reason why the Orthodox haven't had a pan-ecumenical council since the schism with the papacy. Like, you need a central anchor point to unify the chosen, or else it's just gonna devolve into all of this relativism, all of this subjectivism that you see in the culture. And what better way to literally, like, I mean, I don't know, like, if I were the devil, I literally would want to like make sure to get even good faithful Catholics to speak horribly about this guardian of tradition in the public sphere to demotivate people that are considering Catholicism from coming fully into the Catholic Church. And if they do, they'll just go to it to an extent. They'll just get to it to an extent, but not. But their hearts might not be fully in there. And of course, Jesus wants you to chase Him with all your heart. And again, you can't be lukewarm on such issues. You have to be either completely in for Christ, or you're picking and choosing what you want, one foot in, one foot out. You have to totally accept His body, or you're not, or you're not fully for Him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to also understanding that we can disagree with the Pope, but we need to
Mm.
have, we need to have a level of respect
Yeah,
for the authority that he has. And
yeah,
disagree has like this negative idea that it means arguing or like being disrespectful. Disagree just means, oh, I don't know if I necessarily agree with how that was said or the way this went about, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to try and find some actual true sources and see if I can figure this out. And that's why we always say the Pope Respector One on Twitter is a great resource for this.
yeah,
Um, and for me personally, it's one of those things that I see all these headlines flying around X or Twitter or whatever, at Facebook and things, and people send them to me and they're like, what does this mean? What does this mean? I'm like, look, I'm not really one to speak authoritatively, first of all, but in this aspect of what the Pope meant, but at the same time there are sources out there that aren't warped, who actually don't take his stuff out of context, and that actually help you to better understand what he's trying to communicate and
mm,
maybe why he's communicating in that way. But too many people are just so quick to just jump on the hate train for Pope Francis, and it is disheartening to see. Like, we see it, and it creates issues. Like you're saying, people are less likely to join the church when they see real Catholics, first of all, not just bashing their father, the Pope, the leader, the vicar of Christ, but also each other. I mean,
yeah,
not only do we have disunity in other churches like Protestantism and Orthodoxy, but people will come to the Catholic Church and see the trads versus the Novus Ordo people. They'll see, this versus that and that. And we all have to understand that the difference between the Catholic Church and all these other places that have like disunity is that we do have unity because we do have we compiled the Bible, we have the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we know exactly why we believe what we believe. The issue is that people are poorly catechized, they get swept up into these other ideas from maybe these other religions, and they're like, oh well, that makes sense to me. But we can be, I mean, spiritually we're not always the smartest.
mm.
And we need to be able to always have the benefit of the doubt and be able to do our own research and not just rely on what other people are saying online.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do want to reaffirm that you can definitely disagree with the Pope on stuff that's like, not magisterial, obviously. Like you can definitely like be like, hey, maybe that might have not been the best action to do, or he might have misspoken here and stuff like that. You can definitely do that. My issue really is like how people communicate about their own father online. Like your father can make mistakes. Your father might fall short, but how do you speak about him in public to other people? It's not you're not just when people like whine about the Pope, you're not just whining about another grown man in public. You're whining about your literal father. That's your spiritual father, and not just another priest. That's the vicar of Christ. Now, again, like you can disagree and you can give feedback in such a charitable manner. Um, and honestly, like, and even on that, I would also add like, you know, why are you doing the public criticism is also something else to keep into account. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you want to shed light to Protestants and show, look, we're we can disagree with the Pope, but we still have to assent to stuff that's magisterial? Or do you just want to like do you just want to like literally get views and get good boy points and just get good boy points from people without wanting to like kind of push them further into the Catholic Church? Like that's a huge thing. Now and people have like a misconception, I think, that you only have to listen to the Pope when he's speaking ex cathedra. That's not true. You have to listen to the Pope even when he's speaking magisterially. Magisterial documents are not ex cathedra, obviously, but they are magisterial. They're
Mhm.
authoritative. I mean, the Bible, the canon of the Bible was a magisterial thing, like literally when it was first promulgated. So you can't, unless you want to like be like, well, I don't have to assent to that or whatever. But like, it was later, definitively defined in the, later on in the after during the thing when Protestant after the Protestant Reformation, right, when it was going in
Yeah.
the Council of Trent, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like there's a lot of things that have been magisterial, and then later the church, in her wisdom, decides when it wants to definitively decide it. But there's a matter of faith there that you have to be like, look, I'm gonna assent to the magisterial teachings of the church, even though she hasn't sealed it with this, with the seal of infallibility. So, you still have to have the humility to be like, look, maybe I don't know best. I'll have faith in that, because there's no like sin in like, if the church, and by the way, I don't know, we still don't know if there's like, at least from what I've seen, I still don't know if there's any single magisterial teaching that's ever been erroneous. But what's better or what's worst, you know, denying a magisterial teaching that you personally think, or because some other source or whatever you personally interpret to be erroneous, and so you reject it, and turns out you were wrong. So now now you're literally going against, you had me to be wrong and you're going against it, or you were assenting and obeying to the magisterium, and doing your best to humbly obey, and like, look, I won't rely on my own understanding, and I will, and if it happens to be erroneous in the future, it's like, well, you're not really much with much culpability, because like, of course, you were just, you're not the papacy, you're not the magisterium, you're not all the cardinals, right? It's not really, the culpability is not much there. But when there's different levels, I think there's different levels to really talk about, when it's like, okay, like, are you gonna really rely on your own understanding, or are you gonna maybe trust in the church? There's a certain level of culpability, like if you happen to be wrong here, or if the church happens to be wrong here, it's like, well, I mean, saying the church happens to be wrong just sounds like really bad, but like, the church
I know
won't,
what you
like,
mean.
the point is, the church won't ever lead souls to harm. The church won't ever approve something that is harmful to souls. That's the point. That's the point, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, another point that I've heard quite a lot is from, people who defend the Pope is also that we weren't meant to know this much about each other's lives on social media. We
Mhm.
weren't meant to see this many faces in our lifetime on social media. We weren't meant to know every single thing about the Pope and what he does. Because back like years and years and years ago, some people didn't even know who the Pope was. I mean, they had no real access to him. He was the vicar of Christ, and most people knew his name or something, but they didn't know when he sneezed or when he went to certain places or what he had for breakfast. And now it's all over the place. It's like we have so much access to his life, that it's almost damaging in a way. I don't think we're meant to be this public with our lives.
He's the first social media pope.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
literally, he's
Oh
literally
well,
the
I mean,
first.
like Pope JP2, he had some Saint Pope JP2. He had some social media in the
At
sense
the
of just like
very end,
outreach, but
yeah.
not how it is today, for
No,
sure.
definitely not how it is today. Like, like, social media, I think, really took off like around like 2008, 2012 ish. Pope Francis was elected in 2013.
Right.
Dude, like, it's like literally like if anyone's the social media pope, it's Pope Francis. Like, the first case we've seen of a papacy with social media. So, to like, that's why I think that, like, when people really start to be like, well, other popes wouldn't have done this, JP2 wouldn't have been like this, all the other popes wouldn't have had like the same issues. It's like, well, I don't think we can know that for sure, because so far, like, this is none of those popes have lived under the same social media, like where we're at with social media, as Pope Francis has.
Hmm.
And that's something to really, that's something to take note. Really, that's something to take note.
I
Also,
mean,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, back then all they had were like newspapers and radio shows. They didn't have,
Yeah.
and most of the time the Pope wasn't even on radio. It was like
Yeah.
words or encyclicals and things. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I, don't get me. I do think that there are, like, the Pope. Like, I mean, I think that it wouldn't be crazy to say that the Pope might have enemies in the very in the very Vatican itself. Like, there have been times when there have been conversations that were private, that were supposed to be private,
Hmm.
and why are they now why are they now put out online and stuff like that? Like, these are supposed to be private conversations, and yet they're getting quote unquote leaked. Like,
Hmm.
this is, and it could be from people. Here's two theories that I have. It could either be from people that want to, like, it could either be from people that are kind of more on, like, lean towards the schism side, that don't want to see the Pope win or whatever. And it could be those kinds of people that, like, want to literally show, like, look how the liberal the Pope is, or look how, like, he worded this, like, look how vaguely he worded this to, like, this one group of people that he's trying to, like, meet them where that or whatever, right? Like, look at this, right? That could be one possibility. Other possibility could also be there are actual liberals. There are
Yeah.
actual liberals that want to be like, hey, look, the Pope is, kind of maybe hinting at something here. Like it could really be go on either way, right? Or it could just be from people that don't even aren't even Catholic and they just want something to get like a news bite out of, right?
Yeah.
It could really go so many different ways. It's the situation. Like you gotta understand, like the world is so much more nuanced, and I think humans try to put other humans in such little boxes and try to understand them based on like our own perception. But like humans are so complicated, right? And that's why like and I've worked in like a lot of like positions that require like kind of managing a lot of different people, whether it's for a job or whether it's like for creative stuff. And one thing that I've always understood, or at least I've come to understand at least, is that leaders are judged very harshly and a lot of times very ignorantly
Mhm.
by people that have never been in their shoes.
Yeah.
Um, and I see this like a lot because it's like, you other leaders can understand like it could maybe kind of grasp where the Pope is at, right? Or understand how much they cannot grasp where the Pope is at. But when people start saying like really stuff like, well, why couldn't we just said this or this and that and that and that? Sure, there's room to obviously want him to pursue even bigger heights, right? Of bigger, more communication, like better ways to communicate stuff, right? But at the same time, you also got to remember he's the freaking Pope. He's the pastor, a global pastor, the literal global pastor. Every single thing he does, I have to be really careful with what I do with my social media. I'm not even a priest, okay?
Yeah.
I'm not even a priest. I just do like I just influence a lot of people online, right? But when you are the Holy Father, like literally every one of your, can you imagine how nuanced all your actions have to be? But
I wouldn't
people,
want to post. I'd be like, "Can I leave? Can I
exactly, because
go?"
because not only are you trying to like satisfy the people that are like wanting like wanting everything to be like kind of how as articulate as they would want it to be, but you also have to like be gentle, have gentle teaching as the Bible instructs us to have gentle teaching, right? To make sure that we're not unnecessarily stepping on some unfortunate traumas that a lot of people might have in certain parts of the world or even certain communities, right? Like this is like stuff that like actually matters. Of course, as we talked in the last episode, it does matter how we communicate. I mean, Jesus himself, like you can only of course as Catholics, we don't believe that everything Jesus did was in the Bible. The Bible itself doesn't even say that, right?
Mhm.
But not his expressions, not his mannerisms, not all that wasn't taught wasn't shown in the Bible. How he talked to other people, like do you think that all the people he talked to is all documented in the Bible? No, I don't think so. So you really have to recognize like how nuanced do you think all of these actions really are? And again, maybe the Pope really does mess up, and I think there's been moments where I think he really could. Like I was like, dang, like I think he could have said something way better here. Like there are moments that I agree with that, but at the same time, I have to be humble enough to be like, I am not in his shoes. I am not the Pope. Like I already struggle a lot with where I'm at, with like with how many people I already influence, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, Amber. Right? There's a lot of things that you have to literally, so many factors that you have to keep in mind. Imagine being
Yeah.
the freaking Pope.
I mean, not to mention too, it's like how many times have I been on a podcast and I was like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that,"
Yeah.
but it wasn't blown out of proportion because at that time I wasn't a huge social media person. And it
Yeah.
kind of almost reminds me of like Moses and the Israelites and how God was literally giving them everything that they needed to survive, but because of the Israelites constantly going against God and going against Moses and being like, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore," and like, "Are you sure you're not going to kill us?" and like blah 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 blah, they were wandering around for years because they didn't trust in Christ. And there was this whole thing. And, it reminds me of a book from Dan, oh my gosh. Sorry, Joshua Charles and Alec Torres. It's called Persecuted from Within. You guys can get it
Hmm.
on Sophia Press or Amazon or whatever. And it goes through history of the the saints and the popes who were persecuted from people within the church. Sometimes the pope themselves, sometimes other church. I mean, Saint Joan of Arc's story is just a great example of that. She was literally put to death, and the pope had basically no idea about it.
Hmm.
I mean, he also didn't really do anything to stop it. But the point is that there have been so many situations where we have been under scrutiny, where we have been under attack, where we've been persecuted, and it all started with Judas. I mean, Jesus literally was showing us that Judas, he left mass early, which was the Last Supper. He betrayed, and I do believe this is not an official teaching of the church or anything like that. People think like, oh, well, Judas was destined for hell. I don't necessarily think that. I think there was time for Judas to repent like Peter did. There was time to go
Mm,
find Mary. There was time, but instead he gave into despair and he killed himself. And I think, at the end of the day, we really need to keep ourselves from that spirit of Judas and that spirit of just wanting to condemn and fall into despair, just in general, not even just about the Pope, but our own lives and things like that. That is the worst thing, despair. If the devil can get you to despair, like, what else can he do? And I think we need to remember that negativity, um and people, they think of negativity as just like any bad emotion or anything bad. No, that's not necessarily what I mean. I mean
mm.
negativity in the sense of bad, like, just not like correction or like, I don't know. See, this is the thing with language changing and certain words not meaning what they mean anymore. It's so difficult for me to communicate what I mean. um I don't mean it as in like, corrections or, constructive criticism. That's not
Mhm.
negativity. Negativity is when you're actively seeking out people to maybe defame them or to make them look bad. Whether it's warranted or not, that's not up to you. And just soaking in the doom scrolling. I mean, that's a
Oh
huge
yeah.
thing these days. And then just bashing, just Pope bashing or whatever. It's like that is not of God. God,
Mm-mm.
and oh, okay, I just remembered this. Okay, one person, I I tweeted, I was like, Catholics, this is just your friendly reminder to be charitable in your interactions today. I always do a charitable kind of tweet just to remind people because some people just forget, right? They need a little reminder.
Yeah.
And this one person said, well, if Jesus can flip tables and yell at people, so can I. And I was like,
Such a
no, no. Okay, first of all, you're taking that out of context
yeah.
because they were literally doing one of the worst things you could possibly do, which is literally go to the house of God, and they were selling things, and they were misusing the house of God, right? That is actually a form of sacrilege that they were performing. So Jesus was getting them out of there, and that was righteous anger, of course. But when it came to these quote unquote idiots or stupid people that person said, they're like, well, I can like yell and whatever at stupid people. It's like, what did Jesus do with sinners, with prostitutes, with tax collectors? He sat down with them. He was friendly with them. He joked around with them. He never ever condoned their sin. He called them to repentance and to change, but he never once admonished a person that came and was genuinely open to learning. And when it comes to
Yeah.
these other trolls and things like that, you have to learn to ignore them. Don't throw your pearls to swine.
The Bible is very clear about you have to when you teach you have to be gentle about it. It's very clear about it. And I think people just don't that doesn't it's not a popular Bible verse probably because people don't want to do that. Even Christians, people don't want to have the strength to resist their own anger when they see sinful things. And so because they don't have self restraint and they don't have they don't know how to measure themselves or maybe they can't measure themselves to the best extent which I couldn't before, like sometimes when I do get mad when I see some things that I'm like, dude, this is like so deceiving. And I like, I will write like kind of what I want to like say, with a dessert, with my like videos and stuff like that. But then like I'll look back and I'm like, okay, you know, this is not gentle, but same message, of course, but like I of course rephrase it in a way that's more gentle. Um,
Yeah.
but like that's like, and I don't think that's very popular, unfortunately, because it really does take a lot of strength. And I'm not just saying that to like, kind of gas myself up. Like it's hard. It's really, really hard when you see stuff that like, really does, strike a nerve when they're offending your Lord and stuff like that. Like it really does strike a nerve. But and frankly that's like I think that could be our fallenness really kind of trying to I don't know maybe just not playing to our best to our best advantage because then like when you're trying to fix for that error now you have this other mistake which is like you're not even fixing it to a to the best of your capabilities or worse yet you're potentially not even pushing people away from that teaching
Mm-hmm.
because you're not teaching it in the most because you're not teaching it in a way that can make it seem rational to other people. So that's so huge. I mean, charitable teaching, and of course, I mean, I don't I that the flipping the tables thing. I've seen so many Christians use that analogy, like, well, why don't you just we should I think I saw like you're sitting with people that you should be you're sitting at tables that that you should be flipping tables at. It's like, well, you you do like context matters. Like, what are they doing here? Like, are they like sacrificing a child, or are they simply saying something that's like heinously incorrect and like very deceiving? but it's not like, they're not gambling, or they're not making making the church into a marketplace, right? Like
Yeah.
like he flipped tables because of that context. He didn't flip tables because someone said something false about him or something. In fact, what did he do when he said something false about him?
Well, Saint Peter tried to defend him by cutting off the ear of a Roman, and
Yeah.
Jesus admonished Peter and reattached the Roman's ear and was like,
Yeah.
"Nope, sweetie, put away your sword."
This reminds me, actually, and I actually want to. Here's another attitude that I do want to, like, kind of give feedback to.
Okay, let's go. Let's
um,
go.
People use the Peter that Peter reference to say that Christians shouldn't take over governments and shouldn't take over power.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
which it makes sense at first, I think, to some people, because it's like, well, like, Jesus didn't call us to take power and gain political influence, because he look what he did to Peter. He told Peter not to do it. But it's like, well, the context of that was that this if Jesus needed to go and fulfill the prophecy of being sacrificed on the cross, right? Now, of course, that's not to say that, like, to not be, to now not be gentle in teaching or whatever. Obviously there's nuance with all that, right? But people might use that example to be like, well, um, we should just not do anything because, like, that's what happened. It's like, well, you're missing the context of that too, right? You got to keep in mind, right? We literally pray in the Our Father, your will be done on earth
Mm-hmm.
as it is in heaven. Right, we're literally called to, to try to protect others and stuff like that. And I think that gets into the, like, it's just such a illogical mentality, because, like, well, would you stop someone from getting raped? Yes,
Yeah.
you would. So why wouldn't you want to take more power to stop more people from getting raped and from stealing and all these other things? Why wouldn't you want that? That's the point of government. So it's like, I do find it so, I do think that it's people that believe that, like, okay, well, Christians should just be anarchists. I've met people like that.
That's
When
unfortunate.
it really is unfortunate, and, like, again, like, I think they might have good intentions, but it's like, that's just not a. I do think that, again, if I were the devil, I would, okay, I can't get you to be an atheist, but I can get you to not be effective in trying to stop evil, and I
Yeah.
can get you to I can get you to not be effective in trying to evangelize more people, using, because, of course, like, people that aren't addicted to pornography, people that aren't addicted to drugs and stuff like that, which, of course, if Catholics ran the government, we would, if devout Catholics would run the government, we would automatically ban, obviously, right? Like,
Right.
people that are addicted to pornography and all these other things, do you think it's easier for them to, like, they're getting attachments to sin? Do you think it's easier for them to kind of, like, maybe accept the message of Christ? Maybe people that, like, generally want to, like, leave that, but there's, like, a lot of people that are, like, attached to it now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you want
Yeah.
a government that literally, like, helps avoid those attachments from forming?
Yeah. I mean, and it's really difficult too because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, there's nuance because if we ban all this stuff right away, there's going to be riots." You got to suck the poison out. You're going to have to suck out the poison, and there's going to be a lot. There's going to be it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And you can take an incrementalist approach too, if it's prudent as well. You can always
Right.
take an incrementalist approach, right? Like, because, there's ways to. Now, of course, it depends, like, on what kind of, like, again, when it comes to politics, it's very nuanced, right? But
Yes.
but you can, like, there's a lot of ways to go about it. But as long as we agree this stuff should be banned, then we're off to a right start. But when
Yeah.
people start saying, well, I don't know, the government shouldn't tell us what to do.
You
Are
should
you a
Google
liberal?
me.
Are you a liberal? Like, you sound like a. Well, yeah. Wait, say that again.
The
The
other one.
government shouldn't tell us what to do because, well, I don't know. That's what the libertarians told me.
I know it's really frustrating too because as Catholics, I feel like, you know, I mean, granted, we're all called to do certain things at certain times, and we do that through the Holy Spirit. And not every single thing that a saint has done throughout their lifetime we should copy. But we do have great examples, because God wants a saint you. He doesn't want a saint, you know, another Saint Joan of Arc or anything like that. He wants a saint you, and you have to be open to what God is asking of you and what He is calling you to. But there are times where these saints have done heroic things. I mentioned this in a previous podcast a few months ago, where there was a saint. I still don't remember what the saint's name is, but he was basically against these arena fights back in Rome in the Colosseum. They'd have these beasts and they'd have gladiators or whatever, and it was
Mm.
really gory. People lost their lives, and Christians would come and watch this, and he was like, this is evil, this is bad, this isn't good. So he went into the arena and he talked to these people, and the entire arena went silent as he was preaching to them about how this was bad and how this wasn't Christ-like. And I don't remember if he was a bishop or anything, but he I don't remember. But at the time, the emperor was Catholic, or well, Christian, because at that time Catholics were the only Christians. And he didn't know about any of this, but basically they stoned him, the saint, they stoned him to death. And then after that, they left and they were like, oh well, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was an end to those arena fights. And then after that, the emperor outlawed and banned those types of entertainment. And so it's interesting because you wouldn't automatically think like, I'm going to preach against this today and die. It's like, but that's kind of the world we still live in today in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. It's like it takes sacrifice to stand up against these evils.
Yes, yes, it definitely does. Especially losing the support from libertarians, unfortunately.
Yeah, you'll
No,
have
no, no.
that.
I mean, I do kind of want to clarify when I say like, when I make fun of the whole thing, well, your government shouldn't be telling us what to do. It's like, because you might hear like some right wingers say that because the left tends to like, the left might also like kind of argue like, okay, well, we want to decide what to do with your guns or whatever. It's like, the left, it's like, I think the reason why the left is succeeding a lot is because they're actually correct on like a few things, but they're using it for the wrong purposes.
Mm,
They're correct that the government should have like a lot of like at least try to enact power on stuff that they believe that they believe to be good, because they believe abortion to be good. That's why they want the government to protect abortion. They believe a lot of certain things to be good, so that's why they want government to like pretty much allow you to do these certain things, right?
right.
Um, and to ban hate speech and all this stuff, right? So like it's that's because they want the government to do and to enact power on what they believe is good, but what they believe is not good, which is why their politics is bad. But
Hmm.
we have the eternal truths of Christ. We have truth. We have actual goodness on our side. So why would we respond to that being like, well, I'm not gonna be like a leftist, so I'm not gonna enact power to do what is good. What? What? Like it's literally you're supposed to do, and like that's literally what will happen in the end times too. Like Jesus will reign, Christ is king. Like that's what will literally happen, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, I already gave examples as to why it's so important to do such things. And this is not to say to force convert people. I'm not saying that at all. I'm like, the church does condemn forced conversion because those are not real conversions.
Right.
Um, what I am saying is like, let's ban stuff that's actually bad for people that like isn't like, isn't forcing someone's will. Like these are just negative things. Like it's like, ban pornography, ban, artificial contraception, help promote like natural birth control methods, right? And of course, even like holistic methods to deal with period pain and stuff like that. That's like there's a lot of science that's starting to come out that's like, look, you don't actually need chemicals for all this stuff, right?
Hmm.
Now, of course, obviously, if there really is extreme cases to like, to some women, sure, we can probably allow for exceptions for that. But like apart from that, like why else do you need contraception? Like if it's not for health and if it's not for, and if obviously we don't want you using it for sex because that breeds a very abortive society, and that breeds in general just a very degenerate society, and we actually care about our the people we're governing. So let's actually
Right.
ban stuff that actually produces a horrendous society, even if the people who are so wise and moral believe it to be good.
Hmm.
It's like, dude, like, if we lived in a Catholic society, we wouldn't need this. But we live in a very godless society, largely godless. And when people are with God, they're liberal about it. They're Protestant, or they're, or they just fall. They just don't, or if they're Catholic, they don't fully submit to the Catholic Church, right? So it's like, look, we actually need leaders that are actually going to put the people's interests first when the people don't know what's best for them, because there are some people that actually have done the research, have done the studies, and are actually willing to follow God 100%, whereas a lot of people in the country aren't willing to follow God 100%, which de facto means they're not willing the best for them what's best for themselves 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to what I do believe, what you said is very true, is that people don't know what's good for them. I mean, we've seen that so many times where people truly are a little bit lost because, well, first of all, Christ is not the center of our nation. And, that's kind of obvious at this culture we see today and how society is. And
Hmm.
so people are lost. They're hurt. They're searching for a way to feel whole again. And what does the government do? They give them more medication. They give them more,
Yeah.
they legalize weed. They legalize all these other things. You can get
Yeah.
alcohol whenever, wherever you want. You can get, it's just to subdue us into quote unquote submission in a way where, I mean, obviously not everybody, but a lot of people fall for it. And because they feel so depressed. They feel so, they're not getting paid enough at work. The infrastructure of cities absolutely sucks because you can't walk anywhere and everything's gray and mopey and blah and da da da, and there are a lot of reasons why people are depressed these days. I mean, not being able to afford housing, there's so many things. And so they're medicated.
Yeah.
The government offers medication in the form of, weed or other things to keep them quiet and
Yeah.
I mean this has been seen throughout history with governments to keep
Yeah.
from people doing revolutions and to fight back. That's what
And
they do.
that's what you, and that's exactly why, people might say that I'm like advocating to give more to Caesar than what is due. But in having a godless society, in a government that does not put God first, you literally will end up with a society that gives more to Caesar than what is due. Like, because because either you can either have that, which is like, placing a total dependency on the government, which is, well, borderline idol, maybe one could say idolizing the government. Whereas the other extreme would be to have like no government restrictions and just have like a society of chaos that only cares about themselves and stuff like that, right? And that,
Yep.
I mean, either way, the other one is, they're both liberal, but like, and that's why I find it really dumb when people are like, it's either small government or big government. But it's like, no, it depends how you use the government.
Yeah.
Size doesn't matter; it's how you use it. So
Right.
like the smaller or big or whatever. So anyways, that's pretty much. that's,
I'm not gonna say anything.
that's pretty. Yeah. That's pretty. Again, like it really. Um. Yeah. Point stands. Okay.
Well, in general, like government is not inherently evil,
No, it's
but it's
not.
who
It's
we
not.
fill with the government that could potentially lead it. And that's just with anything. I mean, that's social media, that's literature, that's a bunch of different things. It's not inherently evil, but it can be used for evil.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. That's why it really depends who actually occupies the government and how they're using it. Like it really depends on that. Like I really right now.
Is that your phone?
Yeah, give me a second. Hold on.
What
Shoot.
is that ringtone?
Oh, frick. Hold on. Oh my gosh, I can't. Okay, there we go. Sorry. It's my other phone. Sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Anyways, like I wouldn't mind like living under like people like flinch when they hear like certain types of government, like a monarchy or stuff like that, right? But it's like there were
Monarchy is
monarchies that were
supreme.
bad because the leader was bad. Like, imagine if I was dictator of America.
Franco
Let-
for king.
and just so you know, I love Batman, which means I don't like the death penalty. I don't believe in forced conversions because I submit to the Catholic Church, so I won't be forced converting anybody. I have a very nuanced stance on immigration. I mean, my stance is pretty much what the Catholic Church teaches on immigration. So it's like, I'm not anti-immigrant, but I'm also not open borders. I have the pretty much the Catholic, the Christian stance on immigration, right?
Right.
I have, imagine if I was dictator, right? And now I'm sure a lot of people would be very. I also, I would. There's a lot of things that would change. That would be, and everybody would be. A lot of people would be happy, except for people that want to kill their babies and want to be whores. Apart from those people, those people probably wouldn't be happy. But the people that are like wanting to have a good life, have a good family, have good relationships with their neighbors, and have thrive health wise, I would ban seed oil. Oh my gosh, ban seed oils. Ban the I would bring. I like RFK's nutrition stuff. That would be so dope. I wish he was pro life. He cares so much about the human body. I wish he would care about the babies in the mother's wombs too.
True.
But I'm grateful for what there's to be grateful about. So there's so much stuff. Like if somebody that is actually a fine person I'm sinful, of course, but of course, I think that there's a lot of things that I believe that I think that would largely be fine, right? If there's actually a fine person to be dictator of a country, it's like you don't have to worry about genocide or stuff like this because the person is actually a solid person, right?
Mhm.
But if you're now again, like obviously, I don't believe in like any sort of degenerate ways of like just hijacking power, but I don't believe in that. I'm not trying to like advocate for something that's like tyrannic. I'm not trying to advocate for something that's anti-American, obviously. So please don't get me wrong, but like if the people were to elect a dictator like tomorrow or something like that, right? People were to and people were to like all vote on like, okay, let's have a dictator and stuff like that, right? If and again, I'm not trying to advocate for anything illegal here. I'm just saying like if it was all done legally and stuff like that, like that wouldn't be an issue. That wouldn't be an issue. It really wouldn't be an issue. Again, it really depends on who exactly is running the government. Would you rather have someone that's a very fine person running the government, or would you rather have someone or would you have a whole conglomerate of a bunch of people that are like, some lean one way, some lean the other. Again, like if
Yep.
if most of them were all moral, it would probably still be fine. Of course, forms of government aren't intrinsically like liberal, and even democracy. Actually, I actually thought democracy was like intrinsically liberal until like I read liberalism is a sin, which again, it's still kind of like it helped me understand like why that still wouldn't be it. Although again, I personally do kind of still lean towards monarchy myself. Honestly, I know that sounds
Same.
controversial, but like,
It's not though. I
it's
mean, heaven's a monarchy, so
what? Heaven's a monarchy? I thought it was a constitutional republic.
no, it's a monarchy. Christ is king.
Oh man,
That's
gosh.
gonna have to be a podcast for another time.
Yeah, I know we've been going on for a while. Anyways,
How do we want to wrap this one up?
Submit to the kingdom of heaven.
That's a good way. That's a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Submit
yeah,
to
yeah.
Rome.
Yeah, submit to Rome, submit to the divinely appointed vicar of Christ. Don't be a liberal and reject how God has operated for like human history with the chosen people, with one final anchor point to the guy the chosen. And of course, if you have questions about if you want to have like people address, if you want to like resources to address the stuff about the Pope, I actually made a webpage compiling a bunch of resources. It's
Oh.
thefranco.tv / the real Pope Francis. So you can check
Perfect. Can
that
you
out.
send that to me? Can you text that to me so I can put it in the show notes?
Yeah. So you can go check that out. Again, you can check me out at the Franco TV. That's my handle for all social media apps. My website is thefranco.tv. But yeah, you can check all that out. You can check my music on Spotify, Apple Music, all the other things as I mentioned in the last episode. There's some stuff that has questionable titles because I released that before I became Protestant Catholic, but I remastered the lyrics, so the new versions are all good to go, even though the titles are questionable. So just a heads up on that. But yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Amber, for having me on.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And just for everyone who knows, Franco does not drink coffee.
I don't.
No, it was great having you on, Franco. This was so fun. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll probably have you on again in the future.
Dope. Thank you, Amber. God bless.
Yeah, of course. And with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.